Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. Just did a video about the Nikon Z9 autofocus tracking, how it is absolutely amazing and it's absolutely terrible. I'm gonna follow up on that with firmware version 2.0 right after this. I make this video and I think they just announced firmware. I'm gonna put the video out anyway. And I was thinking the firmware 2.0 release for Nikon was very hyped. And this will obviously fix some problems. You know, it's their first big firmware update. I'm not normally a tech guy. I always believe that the best photography comes from the person behind the camera, not the camera itself, but technology matters. And with wildlife photography, especially with what I do this time of year, songbirds, focus matters. We've got to have accurate autofocus systems. And I'm thinking firmware 2.0 is the solution. This hyped beast of a firmware update, which is really focused around video, but for sure they're gonna fix this, right? Well, as soon as I got home from work, before work, I upgraded the firmware. And if you haven't watched the first video on this, please do. I cover the amazing tracking. I cover this problem where it drops off of focus and it just won't come back. I'll put a card up here so that you can check that video out. I also give a couple tips in there. I'm going to show you those tips in action through the lens. So you're going to see me looking through the lens here. You're going to actually see what I recorded as I was out in the field. As soon as I got home from work, firmware is updated. I go out and this is going to be solved. And then this happens. So here's the video. And I get locked on. I'm going to take you, this is exactly my settings through the lens. You'll notice I've changed down to 10 frames a second. With songbirds, it's probably 10 to 15 frames is fine for me. Action, I'll move this up to 20. I've got some presets. The nice thing about so many of these new cameras is you can just adjust all the buttons and make them do all the things you want to do. So I've done that here. I've moved down to 10 frames a second. AFC, tip on that yesterday in yesterday's video. So if you're a Nikon shooter, just get rid of AFS. I'll show you a trick in there how to do it in the first video. And then 3D tracking. I'm actually going to go through a few tracking modes and you'll see that, but all the same problem. Yesterday, it wouldn't focus. It dropped off focus, it went back there and just wouldn't reacquire it at all, even though the bird's right in front of me. So let's take a look through the lens here. It's tracking, same thing as yesterday. When I made this video before the firmware 2.0, tracked fine, sticky, we would call that sticky. Now I drop off, and here's where I had problems with the previous video. Just wouldn't acquire focus. So I'm in AFC mode, I've got that focus point right on the feeder, the bird is still there, and it just won't acquire focus. The feeder is right there. So watch me switch modes. So I'm going to open up all the autofocus points and I'm just going to try to find it. And you can see it's finding the high contrast areas, the tree bark, but that feeder is right in front. So now I go to single mode. I'm going to put it in single point. Will this work? No. I roll through. You're going to see at the top, if you look at the top, you'll see these settings changing. So I go to a bigger focus, a dynamic mode that's a little bit bigger. Focus on the tree, no problem. Get back to the feeder. No, now I'm in the large. Go back to the tree, no problem. Bird's right there. You can see another bird flying in. It just won't find it. Like it just will not. It refuses to focus on this feeder, which is right in front of me. I go to the wide mode. These are, by the way, firmware 2.0 has some new modes, so you'll see these customizable modes. They didn't work. So I go back to 3D. This is the one that really is my favorite, and it should work. And then you can see it picks up the trees. Now I'm going to try to find this really high contrast. There, it found this very high contrast area. This big old baffle, this squirrel baffle that's on there. And you can see it's back on the bird, no problem tracking. Same as all the other things I did. Let's go back here. Try to bring it to the bird. Now watch that. And I want to be very clear on this one. Yes, the video I made earlier. Please watch that if you didn't watch it. The video I made earlier talks about a tip for button focus to preset. So with Nikon and Canon, Sony, I believe also has they all have this on their high-end glass, their prime lenses, and it's just a focus recall for Nikon. I don't know what Sony and Canon call it, but focus recall. So it's a memory recall. It's basically going to assign a pre-established point to where you want it. So I pre-assign that point. I'm going to back this up and play it again. This quick focus is me hitting that button. This is not the camera doing it. And I just want to show you how effective it is when you do it. So there it is. It instantly but it's only in the sweet spot that you program it. And then it has no problem. Then it's picking up the birds again, because now that area is back in focus. Now drop back off, come back on, and you can see, still not picking it up. There's the button focus, there's the memory recall, pulls it right back to where I need it, and now I have no problem. I'm right back on the bird. So this shows the effectiveness of that memory recall. It only works if the bird is within probably 5 or 10 feet of the area you've assigned it. It doesn't have to be exact, but it has to be close. And once it's close, it seems to do fine. Here's a cardinal, female cardinal jumping in, so we'll get a look at her again. Eye detection, no problem. Focus, no problem. Tracking, no problem. You know, nothing's a problem in here. It's only when it drops all the way off. Firmware 2.0, be very clear, did not fix this. Did not fix this. So if that's what you were waiting for, you could stop the video. We're done. I saw no difference when I dropped off and came back. Now this is a big bird. It's right in front of me. It still won't find it. Still won't find the feeder. Now I did notice one thing though. Now I'm going to pause this for a second. I've got a big hemlock tree off to the side. I've got 3 of them over there. The house finches jumped in there. By the way, this is Oscar. I introduced him yesterday. His mate's name, I insulted her. I called Rosa Oscar's mate. And sometimes when I make these videos, I say silly things. Yesterday, I called a square a circle. I called the focus ring a dot. You know, these things happen. I'm not going to re-record the videos. You guys get the point. I'm a human. And it's funny when you actually say things and then you re-watch them, you hear silly things that you say. So yesterday I was making the video and I referred to Rosa as Oscar's mate. So she deserves a full name. So it's Oscar and Rosa. So let's watch this now. A little different here. So we pick up on Rosa. We drop off to the neighbor's house. Okay, maybe 100 yards away, 50 yards away. Now come back. Now watch. Here, we don't have a problem. Here we don't have a problem. And I think the issue here is that we've got enough contrast in the entire scene, and all of the contrast in this scene is in the same focal plane as Rosa, within 5 feet. So it's grabbing the high contrast areas, and because she's in those high contrast areas, we don't have a problem. It's odd. The more isolated the bird was, so that feeder's isolated, the birds on the feeder were isolated. That's where it had a problem. And I believe it to be that once these contrast-based focusing systems go to infinity, the areas in the front, the close areas, become blurred out. They get so out of focus that there's no contrast to pick up on. So they simply will not find them. Interesting. I'll play this again, but I want to share a story from yesterday or the other day when I was doing some macro, some flower photography. And I was so frustrated with the Z9, I went back and got my D500. So you'll notice here, absolutely no problem. Go back to the house just to make sure something's not weird here. I think I got to find the roof. I'll pick up on the roof there. Yeah, now we go back. And watch. The bird is in the high contrast area, the same focal plane as the high contrast. No problem. So this did very, very well in this hemlock. So then I go back to the feeder and say, okay, well, maybe the firmware 2.0 did fix a problem, knowing that it probably didn't. And right back to where, this is a big bird. Cardinals are about as big a songbird as you're going to photograph. Can't find it. And again, I showed you when I went through all the different modes, had no luck with it. So bottom line, did firmware 2.0 actually fix or improve? Maybe it's going to be inherent in all mirrorless systems. Did it improve it? No. But what you did see is when that tip I shared in the previous video, when you implore that button focus, if it's available, if you implore that button focus, makes a big difference. It jumped right back on, picked up focus, everything was solved. So I'll put a link in the description of this video to my first video. So if you want to watch that about these issues, I give you 2 tips in there. One of them is the button focus, and I will put a link to the actual video where I explain this button focus and how I use it. I use it for both birds in flight and for songbirds. So please check that out. This was a real quick video. I wanted to get it out quickly to answer some questions about firmware 2.0 in case somebody thought this fixed these focusing problems. To what I saw today in about 30 minutes of testing out in the field, it was no different than before. I told you I was going to share a story about macro photography. I'm going to tell you this real quick before I log off. I took the 70 to 200 out the other day. I'm a native plant freak. I've got hundreds of native species on my property here that I've done over the last 3 years. And I went to photograph some Virginia bluebells, these beautiful flowers. I take the macro lens out and I'm very close focus. I'm pretty much at minimum focus distance on my 70 to 200, which I love to use for flower photography. Wouldn't pick up focus. The autofocus system would not work at that range. It jumped to infinity or out in the distance, and it literally, even though this big flower was occupying 30% of the frame, large in the frame, and the focus point was right on it, the autofocus system would not. It refused to pick up that. And I resorted to manual focus. I actually got so frustrated, I went inside, got my D500 and my dedicated 100mm macro lens, and I shot with that. It's frustrating. Now, again, you did see that tip help you out. So if you've got the button, focus, memory recall, those buttons on your lens that you can use, I would definitely take advantage of it for songbirds. Right now, maybe in the future this will go away, maybe another firmware version or something out, technology, but the Z9, very much like the Z6 II, close songbirds, just doesn't want to focus on it. So quick video today. Thanks for joining me. I am going to log off. I always thank you for your support though. I never log off before thanking you for your support. I'll put some links at the bottom to my Patreon site where I take you in the field, behind the scenes. I do a lot of editing videos. So check that out if you want to improve your bird photography. I'll put a link down there as well for this one. And thanks for your ongoing support. And I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.